Hello, guys. Today we're going to talk about ancient China. Now, when people think of ancient China, what comes to mind is probably the Great Wall or Terracotta Army. But China has 5,000 years of history, and each dynasty had its own unique culture and contribution to society. So let's take a brief look at some of these dynasties. Jia Dynasty, 2070 BC, 1600 BC. The Jia dynasty is considered the first dynasty in Chinese history, but unfortunately, there's no archaeological evidence to prove it existed. There are records from the Shang dynasty that mention the Xia dynasty as being ruled by Emperor Yu the Great, who was the one who appointed the first officials and implemented a system of laws. Unfortunately, because there's no archaeological evidence to support this dynasty, most historians consider it a semi-mythical age. But it is still important because it represents the start of Chinese civilization. Next up, we have the Shang dynasty, 1600 BC, 1046 BC. This dynasty is considered real by most historians since there's a lot of archaeological evidence to support it. It all started when a tribe from the northwest, known as the Shang people, conquered the Central Plains and established their capital at Bo. During this time, the Shang kings were obsessed with divination, and they did so by throwing turtle shells and pieces of scapula, which are the shoulder blades of animals. They would then read the patterns in the cracks to determine the outcome of future events. Now, even though the Shang kings practiced human sacrifice, it was more common for them to use a surrogate, such as livestock or members of the royal court instead. Now, the Shang dynasty is also known for creating the earliest known Chinese writing system. Now, during this time, bronze was very important. In fact, they created elaborate ritual vessels and weapons, and were experts at making intricate patterns known as taoti. And this continued throughout many dynasties. Now, next up, we have the Zhou dynasty, 1046 BC, 256 BC. Now, this dynasty is divided into two periods, the Western Zhou and the Eastern Zhou. The Western Zhou lasted from 1046 to 771 BC, and during this time the king's power was centralized. However, after the fall of the capital at Haojing, the dynasty entered a period known as the Spring and Autumn, and eventually the Warring States period. During this time, the king's power was decentralized and was given to the feudal lords. Now, during the Spring and Autumn period, there were 7 major states: Jin, Chu, Qi, Lu, Song, Wei, and Zheng, and they competed for power. Later, 4 of these states rose to become hegemons, and eventually 3 of them fought over supremacy in the region. Now, during the Eastern Zhou dynasty, there was a philosophical revolution, and this was a time where many schools of thought emerged: Confucianism, Taoism, legalism, and many others. In fact, it was during this time when China saw the construction of magnificent tombs for the elite and aristocrats, and some of these tombs were filled with incredible artifacts. Okay, now moving on, we have the Qin dynasty, 221 BC, 206 BC. Now, this dynasty was founded by Ying Zheng, who previously was the king of the state of Qin, and he conquered the other 6 states to unite China under his rule. He standardized weights and measures, currency, and even the written language. He also built roads, canals, and most notably the Great Wall of China. Now, he also implemented a legalist system of government, and this caused him to be very unpopular with the masses. After his death, the empire fell apart, and it was replaced by the Han dynasty. The Han dynasty, 202 BC, 220 AD. During this time, China experienced its second period of unification, and the dynasty was founded by Liu Bang, a former peasant who became emperor. The Han dynasty is divided into 2 periods, the Western Han and the Eastern Han. The Western Han lasted until 9 AD, when Wang Mang took control of the government and established the Xin dynasty, which only lasted 23 years before being overthrown by the Wang Mang's relatives, the Liu family, restoring the Han dynasty. Now, during the Han dynasty, there was the famous Silk Road, and this was a network of trade routes that connected China to the West, and this was very profitable for China as they traded silk and tea for horses. Now, the Han Dynasty also made great strides in technology with the invention of paper, the first seismograph, and the astrolabe. Also, during this time, the 5 Confucian classics were compiled, and this gave the Confucian philosophy a big boost. However, towards the end of the Eastern Han Dynasty, the empire began to weaken, and this led to the Three Kingdoms period. Now, speaking of the Three Kingdoms, we have the Three Kingdoms period, 220 AD, 280 AD. During this time, China was divided into 3 kingdoms, Wei, Shu, and Wu. Each kingdom was vying for supremacy, and this led to centuries of warfare. But thankfully, in 280 AD, the kingdom of Jin conquered the other 2 kingdoms and reunited China once again. The Jin dynasty, 266 AD, 420 AD. Now, the Jin dynasty is divided into 2 periods, the Western Jin and the Eastern Jin. The Western Jin was a continuation of the previous dynasty, and it only lasted 40 years due to the massive Taishu rebellion. This forced the Jin emperor to flee east and establish the Eastern Jin dynasty. The Eastern Jin dynasty lasted 150 years, and during this time Buddhism flourished in China. Next up, we have the Southern and Northern dynasties, 420, 589 AD. During this time, China was divided into 2, the Southern dynasties in the south and the Northern dynasties in the north. The Northern dynasties were ruled by nomadic tribes from the Mongolian steppe, while the Southern dynasties were ruled by the descendants of the Eastern Jin nobility. Now, even though there were 2 separate regions, they shared cultural and economic ties, and the most notable achievement during this time was the construction of the magnificent tomb of the Northern Wei dynasty ruler, Emperor Xiaowen. The Sui dynasty, 581, 618 AD. The Sui dynasty reunited China under the rule of Emperor Wen and then Emperor Yang. Now, even though Emperor Yang was ambitious and accomplished a lot, he is mostly remembered for destroying the Great Wall of China. But fortunately, the wall was rebuilt in the following dynasty. The Sui dynasty was short-lived, and it ended with the second emperor being deposed by his own son. The Tang dynasty, 618, 907 AD. This dynasty is considered a golden age in Chinese history, and it marked the beginning of the second period of classical age. During this time, the empire was stable and prosperous, and this allowed for the arts and culture to flourish. In fact, the capital city of Chang'an was the largest in the world and attracted merchants, scholars, and diplomats from all over Asia. During this time, poetry flourished, and this included famous poets like Li Bai and Du Fu. The Tang dynasty also saw the development of the first mechanical clock, gunpowder, and the compass. And this last invention was instrumental in the Chinese exploration of the ocean. And this brings us to the famous Admiral Zheng He and his voyages of exploration. The Song dynasty, 960, 1279 AD. The Song dynasty was another golden age in Chinese history, and during this time the economy grew rapidly due to the introduction of paper money and the advancement of technology. Now, earlier I mentioned that the Tang dynasty saw the development of the mechanical clock. Well, during the Song dynasty, clocks became commonplace, and these clocks were not just used to tell the time, but they were also used to automatically turn on doors, ring bells, and even serve tea. The Song dynasty also saw the development of the magnetic compass, and this was a major factor in the success of maritime navigation. Now, the Song dynasty is divided into 2 periods, the Northern Song and the Southern Song. The Northern Song lasted until 1127, when the Jurchen people invaded the Song capital and captured the emperor. This forced the Song court to flee south and establish the Southern Song dynasty. The Southern Song continued on for another 50 years until 1279, when Kublai Khan conquered the Song capital and brought an end to the dynasty. The Yuan dynasty, 1279, 1368 AD. This dynasty was founded by Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan. And during this time, China was incorporated into the Mongol Empire, and this ushered in a new era of cultural exchange. During this time, Marco Polo arrived in China, and he was fascinated by the culture and the advancements of China. In fact, He served in the imperial court for 17 years. The Ming Dynasty, 1368-1644 AD. The Ming Dynasty was founded by Zhu Yuanzhang, a former Buddhist monk. And during this time, the capital was moved to Beijing, and the Forbidden City was constructed. Now, the Ming Dynasty saw tremendous growth, and the economy expanded to include silver from the Americas. The arts and culture also flourished, and this included the famous Ming porcelain and the paintings of the Four Gentlemen. Now, the Ming Dynasty is also known for the voyages of Zheng He and the Great Wall repairs. The Qing Dynasty, 1644-1912 AD. Now, this dynasty was founded by the Manchu people, and this marked the end of the imperial examinations and the beginning of the Taiping era. During this time, the Qing government implemented many reforms, and this was in response to the growing influence of Western powers. The most famous Qing emperor was Qianlong, and he ruled for 60 years. Unfortunately, the last two emperors were not as capable, and the dynasty collapsed in 1912. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was kind of fast, and there's a lot of dynasties and a lot of history. So if you want me to make a video about a specific dynasty, let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.